Hi, everybody, and welcome to the very first panel of Octocon 2021, our second online convention. And as you've heard in the opening ceremony, next year we're going to be live and in person in Croke Park in Dublin. This panel is called The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Irish Fan Scene. From the Emerald Garrison to the Celtic Throwdown, from DCAF and the Cupán Fae Writers Group to the USS CúChulain, Gaelcon, and even Octocon itself, Ireland's got a host of fan-run groups and events dedicated to celebrating and creating the things we love. And our panel of local fans are going to tell us more about how to get involved. So this panel actually came about because one of our programme participants had commented they'd moved to Dublin from elsewhere in Ireland and suddenly found all these groups and things they could get involved with, and they wanted to hear more. And we thought, well, what better time to put it on than to showcase Octocon and Irish fans to the world when we've got such a worldwide global convention going on this year online, than to talk about it. So I've got a whole load of fans with me. You can see them to my, the other direction, sorry. And I'm going to ask them all briefly to introduce themselves with their name and to tell me what was the first fan event they attended in Ireland and how did they find out about it. So you can all have a couple of minutes each to do that. And I'm going to start with, first in the panel list for me is Jerry.
Hi, I'm Jerry. I write fiction and TTRPGs, and I've generally been involved with the con scene for a while. A main reason I'd be here is because I set up and run cons.ie, which is a website which lists all the kind of gaming and fandom conventions that are coming in. And as far as the first convention I was at, I believe it was a Star Trek one in Malahide with George Takei and John Delancey. And I was a very small person then.
Róisín, how about you? What was the first fan event you attended?
Hi, I'm Róisín. I'm one of the tri-chairs for the Irish Discworld Convention, and I was really late to the fan scene, to be honest. I've loved Discworld books for a very long time, didn't even really consider conventions or fandoms or anything like that until I heard about actually the second Irish Discworld Convention. I even missed the first one. So the second one, which was in 2011 then in Ennistimon, we went down not really knowing what it was going to be at all. And once we were there about 2 hours, we loved it. And so, 10 years later, I'm somehow the chair now, or one of the three chairs. So we became involved in subsequent years. We just loved helping out, loved doing it. But for me, I feel like I'm a one-trick pony here. I'm all about Discworld. I love Discworld. I have everything to do with Discworld, fantasy books with Discworld. But that's about it for me, really.
It's still good. It's kind of indicative of the breadth of stuff we've got in Ireland that we're fans of and have events for, as you're all going to hear. I'm going to go next to Brian.
My name is Brian Quigley. Sometimes I'm known as Doom on the internet. I'm one of the founders of Celtic Throwdown, which is probably the one, not sure if biggest is the right word, but the premier esports competitive gaming event in Ireland. The first event that I can recall going to is probably Gaelcon in 1997. And I went to that. I heard through a bunch of my friends. We all just suddenly got very into it. It was the 90s, so we were all very interested in our edgelord White Wolf role-playing games. So that's how I kind of first dived into a fan scene.
For the benefit of people listening, can you explain what Gaelcon is?
Gaelcon is a gaming convention, all kinds of games. So you get tabletop RPGs, you get a lot of LARPing. There's often also a video game element. And it would be kind of a venerable tradition in Ireland at this point. It's been running so long, and so many people have been a part of it who are, stalwarts of the Irish fan scene, really.
Mm-hmm. And the next Gaelcon is on in 3 weeks' time, and that's also online. And they're running a couple of tabletop RPGs at Octocon this weekend, so please go sign up through our Discord. And I'm going to go next to Aaron.
Hello, I am Aaron Fever. I am a comic book writer, and as a result, I've taken part in lots of different comic book events around Ireland. I actually, weirdly, my first comic event was actually a different country. It was a while before I came to an Irish one, but that was probably DICE, which is now defunct. But if anyone remembers, it was the convention out in Dundrum, hosted by the Big Bang. But that was a lot of fun. But yeah, it was on an ice rink. Random fact for anybody who wanted to know. But yeah, that's me.
Big Bang is one of the comic shops in Dublin, for those who don't know.
Yes.
So Janet, what was the first fan event you attended in Ireland, and how did you find out about it?
Well, a long time ago, I was on a Yahoo mailing list for Irish gamers, having just come through college, and Hotmail and Yahoo were just starting out, and everybody was only starting to get email. And that's how I heard about Gaelcon. And I too went to the Gaelcon in '97, which was held out in Cupán Hospital back then when it was a review. I was expecting the person who went on to become my firstborn at the time. And I have always and conventions, and they've very much become a hobby of mine. The last 20 years have been really weird for me because usually I bop around the country going to as many conventions as I can do. Whether I go to Itzicon in Galway, WarpCon runs down in Cork, Queens have their own convention, Cupán, which runs up in Belfast. Then NaveCon runs down in Limerick. Basically, if an excuse for a weekend away, I will go. I've yet to make Discworld though, unfortunately. And then after that, I got involved with helping out with Octocon. I got asked to come along and just staff for a weekend. And then I was tapped to be PRO. That had to be PRO for ShamrockCon, which is the Eurocon, which we had here in 2014. I'd previously been involved with Gaelcon and been in Gaelcon committee and been PRO for Gaelcon. I still go back and give Gaelcon a hand when they need. And I've stuck around with Octocon since then. I was chair for 3 years, and then I'm back to doing PRO stuff. And I absolutely enjoy Octocon. I wish I'd have gotten involved with the kind of science fiction fandom earlier. That's one of the things I'm very much an advocate for it, and delighted to tell people about it.
Yeah, I'm actually going to throw in my bit here as well. I'm Catherine. I didn't actually introduce myself. I'm the moderator for this panel. I'm also a program head for Octocon, and I've been living in Northern Ireland for about 20 years, and I didn't start coming to conventions until probably the first Titan Con in Belfast, which was 2011, which was centered around Game of Thrones and has since kind of expanded into various other aspects of sci-fi and fantasy geekdom. And then I started coming to Octocon, and somehow I just ended up on the committee. This seems to happen to quite a few of us, I think, over the years. Aaron, you're doing very well not to get involved in organising these things. They haven't got you yet, but, you know. There's
a couple of people who blame me for having been involved with Octocon. And
yeah, I'm one of them.
Yeah, too many people have seen my nervous breakdowns just from doing Kickstarters, so they said, like, we're not going to ask him to run of an event. It's been lucky.
So my next question actually kind of follows on from what some of us have said about coming to it a bit later than we wish we had. How easy or difficult do you think it is these days to find information about fellow fans in Ireland? Is it harder than it would be in other countries? Do we actually even know? And I'm going to fire that. I don't know. I guess I'll fire that at Róisín first.
Yeah, sure, no problem. Actually, can I add one thing to my opening, because I can't believe
yes, you certainly can.
The Irish Discworld Convention is happening next weekend, so please come along.
That's also
started with that.
That's also online as well, isn't it?
Yeah, it's also online. Yeah, okay. And we only happen every 2 years, so it's our first online one. So we haven't a clue what we're doing, to be honest. But it's all going very, very well.
I can make that one.
Yeah, me too.
Yes, everybody, please. my big definite the one thing I had to say. So I think
I'll just throw in there actually to say a lot of the conventions we've been talking about have got fan tables on our Discord, so come and say hi to them and find out more, including Irish Discord Convention. Right, yes, off you go. How easy is it to actually find your fellow fans?
Well, I suppose, regardless of what country you're in at the moment now, globally, I suppose it's easier with the advent, with the internet. A lot of people are talking about stuff from the late 90s, when a lot of people weren't online, mightn't have even had email addresses and that kind of thing. I know by the time I came around to finding it, it was through searching online. So I think in that sense, it is easier to find these international communities, definitely. And I suppose with what has happened in the last 18 months, it's almost like we've been forced into this area whereby online is the predominant way. But I think there is something, as great as it is that we could do this online, and we're kind of lucky in a sense that this whole thing, well, not lucky that it happened, but that there is this mechanism to keep the fandoms going online. I think for me anyway, with IDW Con and with some of the other cons, that you really want to get together as well, and you get to know people and you get to know the same faces. And, you know, even when I went to Worldcon, it's I'm like, oh, that's a Discworld person and that's a Discworld person, you know. So I think it's the world has just become so much smaller with the internet. I think that's probably the way people are finding stuff, but it's very important for, as you say, TitanCon and these local Irish cons that stay in the one place. I think it's really, really important that we get back to them as well, like when it is safe to do so, because there's huge communities there, which are wonderful to be a part of.
Mm-hmm. Aaron, do you want to talk about how you found your, kindred spirits?
Yeah, I mean, very similar to Róisín in the sense of I don't think it would have happened if not for the internet. I think I was always one of those kids growing up that like had a lot of different interests, and so I had a lot of different friend groups. Like I'm a fan of sports and also Dungeons and Dragons. There's not often do they go hand in hand, because of all those different interests. If you didn't have the right friend who knew about a lot of the events going on, you just didn't know. If you went to a comic book store, you might see a poster on the wall for, maybe an event coming up. But, as a shy, kind of nervous kid, going to them would have been quite intimidating if I didn't have someone to go with me. Whereas now it's so much easier to not only see if you have a friend going to a convention, because most people are tweeting about it, or you see an event come up on their Facebook page or something like that. But you also, are inclined to, join a fan group of some kind or follow a fan account of some kind online, which is going to give you all access to that as well. Like I weirdly only started ever going to conventions because I started doing a podcast. And if it wasn't for that and being kind of invited along to one, I don't think I ever would have been brave enough to go. So I think that's a big part of it. But then also as well as that, like kind of, it's that thing too of you don't even know what a con is going to be like. And I think there's been a great thing in I'd say the last maybe 20 years, if you really want to spread it out, where I think geek culture has been more represented in things. So you could actually have a go and have a look and like, oh, that's what it's going to be when I go there. Okay, I feel more confident in getting involved now. So I think all that kind of stuff had a big part of it for me anyway.
Yeah, I'd agree with that last bit for me as well. It was kind of knowing what actually happens at conventions made me think, well, maybe this is for me after all, because these people I know on Twitter are going and okay, I can go. Jerry, you run cons.ie, which is a website that lists Irish conventions, and hopefully somebody's putting that link in the Twitch chat for us, and we'll have it in our own channel on Discord later as well. Do you think that's a good sort? What prompted you to set that up? Was it to help people find conventions, basically?
Yeah, I'm very grumpy, basically. And okay, a lot of things I do happen because I'm grumpy. And one of them was being at a convention where the guys had done a lot of work on publicity. Sponsored ads, actual ads, even got some TV and a mention on RTE. And then I was meeting people who were still going, well, I didn't know it was on. And it's like, how? So I decided to set up something separate like cons.ie. So there's a list site. So anytime you're wondering what's coming up, if you want a weekend, if Janet's looking for a weekend away, she can go and look, when am I off? Is there anything on then? Something like that. And that's all it exists for. It's like it's not for profit or anything like that. It's just tell me when your thing is, where it is. I'll put it up. I have a Facebook page. It's also cons.ie, and I share things from the various events and the people who organize the fan clubs and that as they go on, and the same with the Twitter account. And it's entirely just because I got fed up with people going, I didn't know that was on. So like 4 years, yeah, I think it's 3 or 4 years later, I'm still grumpy about it.
And the other grumpy thing that you're like, oh, there's nothing on for 2 months and there's 3 conventions in the one weekend.
Yeah, so I was hoping people would stop putting events on that clashed. And then on the second year of it, 7 different conventions happened on the same weekend. And at that point, I nearly just threw up my hands and done. I couldn't believe it because they kept adding on and adding on. And these weren't like small conventions. There was like one in Crow Park. There's one in the RDS. I think it was the first Cork RPG Con was on the same weekend. There was Anime Con. Yeah, all these things all happened in the one weekend. It was like,
I mean, you're going to have different audiences for some of them. You know, people who are going to an anime convention aren't necessarily going to want to go to a tabletop gaming convention as well. But there is still quite an overlap between groups, as you know, we can all attest to, I think. And October is quite packed, so I know we're generally trying to juggle. Okay, when's Gaelcon on? When's Discworld on? And luckily, they're only every 2 years. Luckily for us, I mean. So you know that, but. You know, it's a really helpful resource. But for other kinds of fan groups and things like that, I mean, Janet, you were talking about how you found kind of through college societies seemed to be a really good way, especially in Ireland. A lot of our conventions have come from college societies, for instance.
That's true. The oldest running one is Leprechaun, which runs out of Dublin University, Trinity Gamers. And if they're 36 years running. And then the next one that is Gaelcon, because a bunch of people in Trinity didn't like how the Trinity one was running, so they were splintered off and did their own thing. And you know, colleges have a great advantage, which means that their prices can be lower because they've got funding behind them. It's harder for standalone conventions then to run. But what I find really interesting is the smaller conventions around the country, the smaller events. Like I've been to Wexworld, which runs out of the National Opera Theatre House and Training House in Wexford Town. And that's an amazing venue. And sometimes what weekend you're on depends on when your venue is available. Particularly depending on venue pricing, it's very much a thing. I find that the smaller conventions outside of Cork and outside of Galway and Dublin can also have less hassle securing a venue in their price range, which makes it really interesting. I'm in the very privileged position that I reared my two, well, they're young adults now, as Omni geeks and gamers. So, you know, once they were old enough, they got dragged along to Dominicon at Minute, Vaticon out in UCD, Leprechaun in Trinity, and I've brought them to DCAF when that's run, and they've been to a couple of 24-hour comic books creations. They've also been, they're not old enough to have gone to DICE, they have been to Dublin City Comic Con, and they both have helped out at Gaelcon and Octocon, and one of them's giving a hand being a producer. And what I found interesting is then that they drag their friends along. They'll say to their friends, have you been, will you come? And some of their friends are like, we don't know. And then they get brought along, and then the following years they bring more people. That's the bit I find really interesting. I still find, though, as Jerry says, there are people like, I didn't know that was on, because I don't know, social media communications is something I've been doing for 15 years now. And with having to pay for stuff on the logarithm, it can be harder to get your event out there. I think one of the really good things we do is at different fandom events, network with each other, get leaflets to each other's events to let other people know what's going on. I find that can be a lot really effective, and to follow the other accounts and cross promote, because otherwise it can still be hard to kind of reach out to people, because it's very hard to get anything in the mainstream press. You'd actually might get something in your local paper, be it the Echo or whatever the local Connacht Tribune is in your area. They more often will take notices about fandom events than mainstream papers will, which is always great. I love running into people that I know from other events who've come along to something else, seeing people I know from Gaelcon turn up at Octocon, going down to Wexworlds and seeing people there, or knowing people I know from like vastly different areas turning up at different events, and it's been great. That would be how I got to know Brian. I got to know him through Dominicon and Gaelcon. And then when he was running his event, because events always run on goodwill and the volunteers who come along, I was like, what's your event? Are you looking for volunteers? I'll come and give a hand. Only afterwards I found out the t-shirts were pink, but it was lovely to get a t-shirt. And it was lovely to see, even though fighting games wouldn't be my bag, I'm crap at fighting games, but be able to go and see this is a very different community, but they still have the respecting each other and the commonality and the good sportsmanship, which is amazing.
Mm-hmm. You've actually led me really nicely into the question I wanted to ask Brian. So, Brian, I know you'd said to me that the Irish fighting game community, as well as Celtic Throwdown, which is a yearly event, is that right?
Yep.
And pre-pandemic, you were doing weekly meetups. So we've talked a lot about conventions, which happen once a year. But what kind of fan groups? Do you know of any other fan groups apart from yours that kind of meet more regularly?
I think there is some small board game meetups that are monthly, but I don't actually know of another fandom that meets up the way that fighting game players do. And I think that might be because of necessity, because fighting games are some of the most lag intolerant video games that are out there. So there are people that play, say, a first person. I don't want to go into video games too much, but there are people who play types of games online that don't realize how much the computer is helping their experience. Mm-hmm. You're never actually sure you've shot someone in an FPS, or the computer has just decided that you've shot someone, and that doesn't work in a 1v1 game. So the very concept of fighting games demands offline play and demands sitting beside the person you're playing and talking to them and getting to know them. And that's led to this culture of all around Ireland. There's groups, and in some areas it might only be 6 or 7 people. In Dublin, obviously, it might be a bit more, Belfast a bit more, Cork a bit more, Galway a bit more. But it's led to this kind of aggregations of players that come together. That's really nice. Like, I can't think of any other community that gathers in the same way that we do, actually.
Yeah, I mean, there are obviously other community groups out there. Some of the ones I mentioned in the description of this panel and in the intro are things like writers groups, like the Cupán Fae writers group based in Dublin. They're launching their latest anthology with us tomorrow night. And there's other groups around the country that do that. There's also groups. One of the ones we mentioned again was the USS CúChulain, which is one of the, I believe, 3 Star Trek groups in Ireland. I don't know if anyone wants to talk more about those. And also the Emerald Garrison, who are, tell me if I'm getting this wrong, they're the guys who show up as stormtroopers to events to raise money.
Yes.
Yeah. They're the Star Wars cosplayers.
And Mega City Drudges.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's right. I've seen them as the judges as well. Anyone else got any groups that they want to talk about?
But sorry, you go ahead, Jerry.
No, just on the cosplay thing, you've also got Guild of Nerds, who are kind of behind a lot of the competitions that occur, and they do the judging and things like that. The Emerald Garrison is part of a worldwide network of Star Wars cosplayers, so who raise money for charity and things through their cosplay. But Guild of Nerds is definitely another one worth looking at as well.
Is that an specific Irish group, Jerry?
Yeah, that's a specific Irish group. Yep.
Okay. And how do people find out about it, apart from obviously listening to you talk about it, or maybe just, if they like cosplay, can they just Google it and find it?
Yes.
Oh, well,
this is the short answer.
Great for the internet. Because 20 years ago, you couldn't have.
Yeah, cosplayers have become like social media gurus to a degree. There's quite a lot of very good ones out there. I recently signed up to TikTok, and there's a lot of cosplayers on there doing little performance pieces. But now it seems to be, if you just look up cosplay, you'll find it, and you'll find people like the Guild of Nerds, the Emerald Garrison, and then a bunch of smaller people like New Wolf Studios and Emerald Studios as well. And there's a lot more how-tos out there as well, like how to build your own costume and how to compete or what happens at competitions, things like that. It's a very welcoming group, and they really look after each other. Across the board, I've seen them at DCC and things like that. They really do look out for each other as much as possible. And it's a really nice community, from what I can tell.
Star Trek actually has each chapter of Star Trek fandom is called a different ship. So the USS CúChulain is named after a Pacific ship, and they've got USS Liberty Bell, and I can't remember the name of the third one. But as the Star Trek
USS Caroline is
Caroline.
Belfast.
So as they grow and they form new chapters, each one gets a different ship. So we've got 3 active chapters at the moment in the country and growing. And they've always turned up at Octocon, had a sign-up table, and people that are interested. And it's really great to see that. And it's really great to see that we've got lots of different niche types of fandom, and that we've got crossover. Although there's a type of fandom that we don't seem to have in the country, which I would love to come in. And Worldcon had people from this, and so did ShamrockCon, Eurocon. And that was filkers. That's the people who like singing songs written specifically. And for most people kind of going, what on earth is that? It's like Weird Al Yankovic singing about Star Trek.
Yeah.
That's exactly it.
It's usually taking an existing song and turning the lyrics into something science fictional or fantasy related.
No, I don't know. We've lots of session tradition here in Ireland, but I don't know. It's very rare to get people together and get them willing to sing something a little more Star Trek or Star Wars. But if there's anybody out there, get in touch. We'd love to do something at Octocon.
Definitely. Yeah, we really don't have a filk scene in Ireland. There's not a huge one in the UK either that I'm aware of. Somebody's going to jump on me now and say, yes, there is. But
well, certainly it's great
to have them at Wilcon. Yeah, please tell us.
They need to be louder.
Yeah, sing louder. Aaron, you were going to say something before we all kind of piled in talking about cosplay and filking.
Yeah, no, it's just I was fascinated by what Brian had said about kind of the necessity of having to meet up more often, or at least the desire to meet up more often because you needed to be in person and work with other people and collaborate. Because that's kind of one of the things that I just love about the Irish comic book scene is the Dublin Comic Jam, and they meet up once a month. They meet up on the last Thursday of every month, and they've been going since like 2008. And it's a similar kind of idea in the sense of, you know, it's about, because for anyone who doesn't know, like, I know there are some comic book creators and independent makers out there who are basically like a one-person machine, who's like, they write it, they draw it, they letter it, they do all that kind of stuff. But the average comic book is usually made by a big team of people. Like for example, like the Shipwrecked, which is a webcomic that I also release like print, but that has me writing it. It had Katie Fleming doing the line art, Rebecca Nolte coloring it, Frank kind of lettering it, Paul Carroll helped editing it, Dervla Kelly helped design the book. Like, there's a big team of people, and if you're someone like me who can't draw very well, you need all those people to make the comic book when you're writing it. So they in the Dublin Comic Jam, they meet up and they all do a little bit each, and they make a short comic together. They have a lot of fun. It's all very positive and very open. It's a really lovely bunch of people. But like sometimes they'll do like, I'll do the first panel, you do the next one. Or if someone's like, hey, I've got this idea, and like, yeah, I'll draw that. Like, you know, and it's only a little short comic that they'll make, like a 4-panel thing. But not only is that quite, you know, exciting and can be inspiring for a lot of people, but also as well, it you know, scratches an itch that someone might have. And, you know, as Brian was pointing out, that itch can only go so long without being scratched sometimes. So waiting a whole year to do it again would be impossible. So yeah, I think that's it's to see the commonality in between the two different things. Yes, I love that.
I think as well, there's this weird switch between, someone else was mentioning the barrier to entry, that people are like, what goes on at a con? Like it's some strange alien thing. And that happens a lot with us as well. We get people that are saying that say, I'm not good enough to go, or, you know, I just need to train a bit more before I go and play other people. But the reality is, much like conventions, no one cares. And I mean that in a nice way. No one is judging you. Like the greatest thing you can do for any of these events is come. And I think it's funny the way often it's the people who are there like, oh, I don't want to go, you know, I'm a bit freaked out by that. I don't want to go. When they do go there, they become the people who are like, I'm going to every single one of these. I'm never missing one. Yeah.
No, never happens, ever.
I'm going to be on the committee for it now.
No, you start by going, can I help? Because you like it so much. And you get told, be a gopher, do this, or do you have a skill you might contribute? And then you find yourself maybe on a subcommittee. Octocon would have a couple of subcommittees or a couple of groups where, you know, somebody can drop flyers in somewhere, or, you know, if somebody can get together and help with the badges. Or one of our really interesting subcommittees is for program, to put all these items together and think of them up. And then people will come along and contribute ideas. And then eventually, if you're lucky, they volunteer.
Yeah. I mean, the groups and things we're talking about can't happen without volunteers, because we haven't actually been talking about any of the paid thing, the things we actually pay to go to, like say Dublin Comic Con, and we will touch on those, I think, because there's still a chance for us to express our geekery. But I'll leave that till a bit later. So Aaron, you mentioned a bit earlier about podcasts, and I know Brian has one too. So I kind of want to talk about fan media in Ireland. Is it something we've got quite a lot of? I mean, I'm aware of a few different podcasts. We had a Star Trek panel the other week, which featured Linda Butler, who's from the Nerd Escape podcast. So if anyone wants to, I'm not going to point this at anyone in particular, so whoever wants to talk.
I'll give a quick shout out to the ones that come to mind anyway. I know the Pubcast has been running for quite some time. They're a general kind of nerdery kind of podcast, but they do delve into comic books and stuff like that quite a bit. They've even recently given playing Dungeons and Dragons and releasing that as a thing as well, which is, I think, I can't remember if they've been doing YouTube videos of it, but yeah, they've been kind of running for a long time. They're a good place to start. But I also, if anyone doesn't know who Daniel Fee is, he's this absolutely wonderful young man. I think he's about, he'll probably be, if he's watching, he's going to scream because I'm older than this. I think he's like 13 or something. He's like this young lad. And he does he started out just like on YouTube, like reviewing the comic books that he was getting and enjoying. And now he's like interviewing creators like from all over the world and has some of the biggest comic book names like doing his YouTube like podcast or vlog or whatever you want to call it. And I think that's just absolutely wonderful. And it's a real sign of like, if you just have a passion for something and want to get involved, it can explode and you'll just see how many people like feed off that passion. So yeah, like that's some of the kind of media that comes to mind for me for just like fans of stuff,
There's a huge, massive Irish podcast called OSW Review, which grew out of the Irish wrestling scene on boards.ie actually, and is now one of the biggest podcasts. Oh, well, it's a video podcast. It's one of the biggest ones in the world. And there is actually, when you're talking about unusual niche Irish fandoms, the wrestling fandom used to meet up for pay-per-views all the time, watch them overnight, and an Irish federation actually, which as far as I know is still considered, OTT is the name of it, is considered quite a good one, an independent federation that people go to. Still going, yeah, good.
They were doing live shows in Belfast last weekend.
They've come back after, yeah, that's great. So that's an interesting, and internationally, the Irish are huge in wrestling now. You got wrestlers like Finn Balor and Becky Lynch. It's probably one of the biggest wrestlers in the entire world at the moment.
I'd forgotten about OSW because they've gotten so big that they actually get referenced by some people on those like American wrestling TV shows like WWE. Like people have been like leaving little nuggets of like, hey, I watched the show and stuff like that. And so I was like, I forgot that they were an Irish fan thing because they feel Hollywood to me.
Speaking of Irish podcasts and things that get plugs and big names, I'm going to put a shout out for The World According to Wikipedia, which is run by Rebecca O'Neill and Fionnuala Murphy. And they got a shout out and then they got mentioned in the New York Times, I think today or yesterday. And that's a great podcast about Wikipedia and how that works, basically. It's really fascinating. And it's not just kind of media properties that we can geek out about, I guess.
Also Romancing the Dungeon as a podcast that runs very well, and their Discord servers generally hopping, and that's a really good adventure to listen to. And then I think it's running 14 years now, The Adventuring Party, talk about the Irish gaming tabletop scene so you don't have to. And that always goes, and that's always really well. So they will talk about having gone to an Irish tabletop convention, that this is what we went to, what did you play? I played this is how that went. So they talk about conventions that are upcoming and conventions that have passed. So if you're interested specifically in finding out what attending one of those is like, that's what to listen to.
I'll just add that Declan Doody from Romancing the Dungeon is on our Dungeons and Decolonisation panel, I think, which is on tomorrow. I don't have the programme right in front of me this second, but you can find it on app.octocon.com. Anyone else want to throw in anything about fan media? It doesn't just have to be podcasts. I mean, do people still do fanzines? Are they still a thing? I think they are, judging by the fanzine lounge on Discord we've got going today.
I think fanzines are, and it's interesting to see people wanting to go back to paper fanzines, the limited paper fanzines, rather than doing the online thing. And we had a niche one that ran at our last in-person Octocon. We had a little fanzine running over the weekend called the Observant Octopus, and literally would come out every 3 or 4 hours. There'd be another newspaper edition. It would be just an A4 front and back, but it was a lot of fun to do.
So we've had a question come in from the audience, right, which is from Be Kind, Be Fine. How have you seen Irish fandom change in terms of demographics or acceptance of different people over the years? And for those of us who've been involved in conventions for quite a while, some of us longer than others, and I'm guessing there probably has been a change. I don't know, Róisín, you want to start? Have you got anything to say on that question? Put you on the spot.
Yeah, no worries. I don't know about changing over the years, but one thing I've always noticed from the beginning with say Discworld in particular is that there is a very diverse following in so many different avenues. Most notably, I think, in age. People seem to think that conventions are just for people in their late 20s or early 30s, but we get people well into retirement age, as well as students, as well as families. There's really no median age. Also, the idea that it's all male based is just absolute nonsense. I think we actually get more women than men turning up as well. We also then, in relation to particularly in regards to ableism as well, we're very, very conscious that a lot of our attendees might either need a chair or might just not be able to stand for a very long time. So we have a green dot policy whereby if somebody needs a bit of physical help, that they just wear a green dot and they can skip queues and stuff like that and all that. And of course, the more kind of coming to the front. I mean, people have always been different, but the idea of different orientations and different gender identities is very, very accepting. I think certainly in Discord, and I think in a lot of places as well, the fandoms are very, very safe spaces where people can be themselves, either through cosplay or just through however they want to enact over the weekend. And some people just love to just really show their true self, and it's a wonderful, embracing place to be. And even like this year, like we're doing we're doing a discussion as well by one of our sword master, which, yes, we have sword master who does sword fighting classes when we're in person. But he does a wonderful talk on neurodiversity, and it's asked me about autism, and he talks about how he sees his own neurodiversity within the books, and how he sees that, and how he deals with it in fandom, and how he deals with it in fantasy, and how he sees it. And it's a really wonderful talk, both as a Discworld fan, but as anybody who has autistic friends, or who, we're all so different, and people see themselves in different ways. And we're also doing another panel this year as well on diversity in the Discworld. So I'm probably wandering here on the topic, but I don't know if it's changed in the years I've been there. It's almost like it's always been this really accepting, diverse culture. That's the way I've always seen it, and it's brilliant.
I'm going to ask Janet to talk about this next, because I know this is something that she will have a lot to say on in a good way.
I can't say I have never seen sexism or racism or homophobia in 25 years of going to events and being around fandom. I can't say I've never seen it. I can also fortunately say I've seen people going, that's not on. That's not acceptable. Sorry, what did you say? You need to think again. Why did you touch that person? That's not allowed. Or, or people sitting at a table, play a game, and one player is determined to sex it up with all the female characters, even if the characters are not the characters, whatever characters have been played by the women at the table. And I've seen the GM said, stop, you stop, or we're not playing anymore. I've seen players up and move. I've seen players just say, no, this isn't acceptable. And it's been needed less and less as the years go on, but it's always great that it has been that type of positive space before Me Too, before we talked about diversity openly is what we've did. Octocon has been diverse from its very beginning. We have always had a range of people on the committee from the LGBT community, and also a range of neurodiverse people. And it's really funny when people were like, are there, there's lots of LGBT people. Are there many bi people? And I'm out cracking up because I think at one stage, most of the committee were bi at one stage. We didn't necessarily talk about it, but that's just how it rolls. So we've always had an interest in discussing differences and diversity. And Star Trek has the wonderful, infinite diversity and infinite combinations. So I often think that people who come in and kind of, how can they be futurists and how can they like the hero's journey, or when they can turn around and try and say, these are the boxes we put people in. When so much of what we read in our media is about breaking down those boxes, breaking down those barriers. And I think it's very much a case of, as the communities, we kind of nudge people and say, no, because the communities set those standards. And I think that's a wonderful thing. It's also great to see so many events having a code of conduct, have an explicit code of conduct that's written that people can read beforehand. It lets people know what's acceptable, particularly if you're neurodiverse and you need some stuff spelled out to you, or particularly if you're an anxious person and you're not sure, has somebody actually said something that was out of line? I'm not sure. Maybe I'm just imagining it. You've got the code of conduct to refer to. And I think it's great. And I took a stance a couple of years that I wouldn't go to a convention which didn't have one. And I have to say, it's been wonderful to see them just accepted it right the way across. And it particularly, it's been great to kind of, most things tend to be 50-50. Some things aren't. Fighting games do tend to skew a little towards cis males when you're looking at a mass of people in a room. But when it comes down to the skill of the person and their talent and their reflexes, that's what matters. And it's wonderful to see it.
Yeah, I don't know how anyone else feels, but like coming to the comics community in Ireland, I think they're predominantly LGBTQ plus. Like it feels very, especially like it's a very, actually I would say I know more female comic book creators than I do male. It's a nice group, but I think, and when I go to events, I feel like the community run events and the volunteer run events are usually better policed than maybe the more corporate ones. I think as a community, I think we have a decent handle. Now, as you said, things can always be better. But I think we have a decent handle as a whole of knowing, okay, where our lines are. And, we don't want our other community members to feel left out here or uncomfortable. Whereas I think the more maybe corporate kind of, events that are run by like big companies and stuff like that are a little bit less concerned by those things, and it's a good statement to the Irish community itself, I think.
I would say I noticed about 4 or 5 years ago, I've started seeing a lot more recent arrivals in Ireland starting to show up at events, especially our events. That wasn't something that you wouldn't see someone who was, I'm just in Ireland 2 months. I heard about this community, I'm coming to show up and be part of it. That's new. And I don't know what the difference is, what switch turned about 5 years ago, that because I'm sure that people like that have been here for decades longer, but something did change at some point where they suddenly felt more comfortable to show up, or perhaps our advertising just got better. That's a possibility too. And I just wanted to stay on the topic as well. I think in terms of diversity, you're seeing a lot more young people because of the anime conventions. It's heavily skewed young at those ones. I feel ancient because I'm there a lot because fighting games is a great Japanese tradition. So I usually get asked to come along and run the games room, and I feel like I'm a desiccated corpse at some of them.
You're still younger than me, Brian.
Oh, that's true.
Thanks.
I feel the same going through the anime conventions. Also kind of like a giant poo at some point. The code of conduct things become very important. And I've had to reach out to conventions that I've had on the list because people have gone, these guys have literally just messaged me and gone, they don't seem to have a code of conduct anywhere. I can't find it. And then I've had to get in touch and go, you need to get that up there. And there's some boilerplates out there that you can use. This convention had one, and then you need somebody in charge of looking after that. So there's somebody to go to at any point. If there's a problem, they can go to them. And that because it's like Janet isn't the only one. There was quite a lot of people for a period of about 2 years who just, when I can't find a code of conduct, I'm not going because I have no thing to refer to. There's no rules there to keep me safe. And people who didn't have one and ran anyway, they saw the difference in their numbers. And that's why I think you're starting to get more of the corporate guys are starting to pay attention now as well, because it's going to cost them money. And particularly coming back out where they have to rebuild the reputation of their events to a certain degree, they're really going to have to be watching that. But also, because it makes people feel safer, it brings more people in, and people feel safer bringing their kids to the things, even to the fighting games and to the DCC and things like that. It feels like they can look it up and go, well, there's rules in place. So if, it's there and something will be done if there's a problem. And I think that's one of the big changes over the last 5 years as well. So that might have been part of it, is just people able to look at a website and go and see the rules and go, right, there's a system in place. I should be safe enough to go to this.
I think also being inclusive of children, and we see that the bigger conventions do have a children's track, and Octocon has specific items which are either for children of all ages or specifically tailored for kids. And then anything which is more adult kind of orientated will be put on after the watershed at 9. Because I know that with the tabletop gaming, we saw a lot of people age out. They would settle down and have kids and then not feel that they can bring the kids to the convention. And then I think it's what happens is once we've had several people coming along and bringing their kids, they'll be like, I know one year at Dominicon, we had a nominated kids room because I came at mine and they were under 12. And then a couple of other parents, we let them know there's a room that we can get the kids in. They can play games with us. They can play games with each other, and they can be as loud as they want and not overhear topics maybe that not suitable for little ears. So I think having that type of inclusive, then that becomes, going to those conventions becomes a tradition. And if you're lucky, those kids grow up and become the next generation able to run your event.
I'm going to have to stop us because we're unfortunately out of time, although like all the next lots of questions that I had, we've actually covered things like how do we get more kids into events? And my next question was actually going to be, what does Irish fandom do well? And I think you've all pretty much covered that by saying, we do our best to be inclusive and encourage people to join us and hopefully make them feel safe when they're with us. So thank you very much, everybody, for your time on this panel. You have one sentence in which to plug something, starting with Janet.
Octocon 2022 has now been officially launched and open. We will be in Croke Park the 15th and 16th of October. Registration is open now. It is €60 for the weekend. There are also concession and young people rates. That's Octocon.
And if you had a membership last year or even the year before, it'll have been rolled over. So have a check in your email. Aaron, what do you want to plug?
irishcomics.ie is a website where we have been posting a new comic every weekday, new comic page every weekday by different Irish creators. We're getting more involved with different things coming up, but if you don't like just reading things online, you can check out Dublin Comics Arts on Twitter and other places where they do regular events around Ireland, starting hopefully soon when we're all safe and sound.
Brilliant. Brian.
Celtic Throwdown is on in the Crown Plaza Hotel in Blanchardstown on November 13th and the 14th. If you want to come and find out what these big fighting game events are like, it's our first one back in the flesh, so it should be fun.
Róisín.
Irish Discworld Convention next weekend, kicking off a soft opening on Thursday with full kickoff on Friday. The program should go up on our website, which is www.idwcon.org. Program should go up by Sunday night, I'd say. It is €30 to attend, and we've got 3 charities at this point. All money's going into charities: My Lovely Horse Rescue, Alzheimer's Society of Ireland, and Cork Penny Dinners. So wonderful, wonderful charities. Wonderful stuff going to be happening. Please come along.
Jerry, finally.
Yeah, cons.ie. You'll find me.
That'll do.
Yep. Twitter, Facebook, everything. Cons.ie. You'll find it, and just reach out and tell me about your event as soon as you've got a venue or you're going online confirmed. I'll list it. That's it.
Thank you very much, everybody. That was a brilliant conversation, and I'm delighted that it was our first of Octocon for this year. Seems like a very good one to have had. Thanks, everyone.
Yay.
Thank you.
Keep waving. We're still on screen.